Action items. First one is unit district formation, District 161, participation in Summit Hill 161 unit district feasibility study. I believe we have a presenter for that. Yes, we do.
Good evening, how are you? Not sure what I did to you to end up after the auditors, but here we are.
And there was a note.
So I'm here tonight on behalf of the District 161 School Board. I'm the sitting president for the Summit Hill School District, which feeds into Lincoln Way East, for anyone not familiar with it, and encapsulates portions of Tinley Park, unincorporated Will County, Frankfort, and Mokina. So we have small slivers of a number of different areas. And what
action items. First one is unit district formation, District 161, participation in Summit Hill 161 unit district feasibility study. I believe we have a presenter for that. Yes, we do.
Good evening, how are you? Not sure what I did to you to end up after the auditors, but here we are.
And there was a note.
So I'm here tonight on behalf of the District 161 School Board. I'm the sitting president for the Summit Hill School District, which feeds into Lincoln Way East, for anyone not familiar with it, and encapsulates portions of Tinley Park, unincorporated Will County, Frankfort, and Mokina. So we have small slivers of a number of different areas. And what I'm here representing is I had sent a letter to Mr. Kirking on behalf of the Summit Hill School Board. You may have heard we have launched an investigative committee into the idea of creating a consolidated school district which would serve the area currently served by District 161. Obviously, if a consolidated school district is created, it would remove the high school responsibilities from Lincoln Way 210 for that area and place that with a new district that would be formed. So the idea would be, in the way that the state lays this out, is in this consolidation effort, District 210 would give up the high school responsibilities. Actually, District 161 would completely go away, and a new district would be formed, which would provide a consolidated school running K through 12. One of the steps that go along with an investigation into this topic is the completion of a feasibility study. A feasibility study is something that is done by or I should say is recommended by the state, and it's done by an independent third party. What they do is they come in and investigate a number of topics, everything from the obvious topics, which are the financials, although they do make it clear that they process them in the same format that we submit them to the state, so we don't have to do a lot of shifting there. But they also look at things like student population, building condition, they look at building maintenance, they look at building capacity, they even look at the curriculum, the extracurricular activities, they do staffing and enrollment projections for both districts, and they do some demographic and academic testing analysis also. So they cover a wide variety of items. The items that they look at, we anticipate would, for the most part, be items which are already available, such as your budget, your audited financial statements, which you just discussed, reports that you filed with the state already. There may be some areas that they would ask for additional information, and I can't speak with a great deal of knowledge, as I've never been through one of these, as most people haven't, but in some of the reports that I looked up, the auditors did say that they would have up to 3 meetings over a 4 to 6 month period with the administrations of both districts. So we are working very hard at 161 to shield our administration and business office from additional work, as we have a district to run, the same way you do, but there would be some time commitment. That doesn't necessarily mean that the administration would have to be represented by Dr. Tingley. It may be somebody in the administration from the finance area, or somebody who can speak to buildings and grounds if that's what they're looking at. The reason that we're asking for your cooperation in this is the state of Illinois and the school board puts aside a certain pool of money every year to support consolidation studies and feasibility studies. This year, to the best of my knowledge, and the last I looked, no one had claimed any of that money for 2018, so the full value is still out there. It is done on a first-come, first-served basis, but claiming any of that money requires that both districts involved be cooperating districts and sign on to the feasibility study. So by inviting Lincoln Way and having Lincoln Way sign on to the study, 161 then could claim or process a claim against the funds that the state of Illinois has to help pay for the consultant. The total charges for the consultant we're estimating to be about $20,000. We have an outstanding RFP, but we have not received all the responses yet, so I don't have an exact dollar amount for you. The proposal that we're making is any required funds not covered by the state of Illinois would be covered by District 161. So we are not asking for funding from Lincoln Way 210, only for cooperation and sign-off on the study. Again, I'm not a feasibility study expert, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to do my best.
Rich, just real quick, thank you, by the way, for being here this evening. I appreciate you taking the time. Can you take us through chronologically and hypothetically, what would be the steps in this process if it were to move forward?
You have school board president speak. I have the same thing, thank you very much. Hypothetically speaking, the way this would move forward is if we were to sign on at the beginning of November to have a feasibility study done. The feasibility study, taking 4 to 6 months, would be done no later than the end of April 2019. We'd hope for March of 2019, but planned for April. After the feasibility study is done, there would have to be a decision on the behalf of the 161 committee if they wanted to move forward based on the results of the feasibility study, which will indicate not only the facts, but perhaps benefits that could be realized by 161 and 210 from a consolidation. If the decision was made to move forward, we would have to form what is called a committee of 10. The committee of 10 is required under the statutes that provide for the consolidation. The committee of 10 does not have to be current seated school board members with either district. It simply has to be individuals who live within the 161 area, as that would be the area that would undergo the consolidation. That committee of 10 would then write a referendum. The referendum would call for the consolidation and the separation of high school services from 210, and that would be put on the ballot for 2020, the April ballot for 2020. I don't know the exact date, but it would be the spring ballot in 2020. Before it goes on to the ballot, it's reviewed by the ROE. The ROE issues an opinion and is handed off to the state superintendent. And I should point out, the state superintendent can put a halt to it, even if everyone agrees that it's the right way to go. They can stop it, and then your only option is to have a judge override that. And the state was very clear about this. So the ROE opinion is non-binding. The ROE opinion goes to the state superintendent. The state superintendent's decision is binding, except you do have a legal recourse if you want it. If it is approved by the state or the court, it goes on the ballot for 2020. And sorry, I jumped a couple of steps there. Once it goes on the ballot, everyone within the 210 district would have an opportunity to vote. So this would include not only the 161 residents, but everybody that is currently encompassed by 210. So you'd have all the way New Lenox, Manhattan, all of the districts in the feeder schools would have an opportunity to vote. If hypothetically it passes that vote after hypothetically passing the state superintendent, you would begin a series of meetings with the committee of 10 and the ROE, as the ROE is responsible then for dividing assets. So this was the new thing that I learned when the state came into the presentation to us. The asset distribution, both assets and liabilities, is not determined before the vote. Once you say that you're going to go ahead with the consolidation, separation, the ROE is actually charged with making the divisions of assets and liabilities. Now, there are some things that I could speak to that I think are no-brainers for division. Other things, such as the debt, I could take guesses, but ultimately it's the ROE's decision to do it equitably. So in the case of buildings, the appraisal doesn't matter. You're going to divide that as part of the overall assets of the district, and then you're going to divide the liabilities accordingly. The ROE does that. Everything is separated between the new district that would replace 161 and part of 210, and then you would have to then begin operations to prepare for the following school year to accept high school students.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
And I'm probably jumping way ahead, but so we have, as a district, would have to vote to have this plan go forward, and then you'd find out what the true cost would be?
Correct. Well, I mean, the true cost is going to be determined already because it's...
Division of assets and liabilities.
Correct.
After, you wouldn't know what that cost would be until you got to that point.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Again, you can make intelligent guesses, and the ROE is involved beforehand, so he or she can certainly get on board with a plan that's being circulated, but ultimately the state shared with us that the division would be done by the ROE.
I would assume that there'd be some scheduled division of assets as a moving from ROE to the state board, state superintendent.
The liabilities are pretty much laid out in the school code in 11E105. And basically, the debt still stays with whoever was in the taxing body when the debt was taken on, because you think about it from the bondholder standpoint. I think there's a lot of complexity around that. I did talk to Michelle Henninger, who had presented to Summit Hill, and basically, you have to get to figure out the division of assets. I mean, I can kind of interpret it, but when you get the true thing, this is 11C, which is talking about the appraisals, has never been used before. 11E, which would split the liabilities, basically they said we'd have to have our superintendent contact the local, regional board and ask for an interpretation, which then would have, from the ISBE, and they'd have their legal look into that, how those liabilities would be split. So I think, there's a lot of financial impacts to this that are, I think, need to be kind of looked at, because we have to watch out for the interest of 210, and having that after the fact just doesn't make sense. And I think there's a lot of questions. If we were interested, we would have to ask before. I mean, I think you're not even to the point where I don't even see, from my standpoint, the benefits being laid out. It hasn't really been talked. I've listened to the benefits haven't been laid out. What some of the concerns should be, hasn't been laid out. So I really think there's more work that we would have to do before we would, put 210 into that position. I also, in talking to Michelle on how the actual funding works, so the funding it's basically in a pool of incentives for people who've previously reorganized.
Is this the feasibility funding you're talking about? Okay.
And so if there's anything extra left over, then it goes to feasibility studies. So they've actually paid out 100%, or they've vouchered 100% of their incentives for this year, so there is extra funding. But she said upper management still has to decide on if these feasibility studies will go forward. She thinks they will. They probably will. They always have in the past.
Upper management is ISBE.
Yeah, upper management, her upper management, whatever that is. But that wouldn't be decided until sometime in November, so I think there's some time there.
So two points to follow on. What we're asking 210 to sign up for is in no way related to the consolidation or separation. At this point in time, we're asking for the feasibility study. So where you indicated we would need a lot more facts, we agree with you 100%. This is step one to getting those facts, is to get people who've done this before to organize it. And the second point would be, as far as the money and getting that from the state, I don't disagree with your statement, but again, 161 would carry the risk of that, not cheap tech.
I just think it's hard for us to move, especially move forward with an RFP that someone else is doing, when there's a lot of things we would want to know in a feasibility study. I think what you read off was the basically from the ISDE's website. And, you know, I talked to her about this. I mean, this is the basics. This is never, what's being proposed has never been done before, where you have 2 districts and you're not taking a full high school district. Now, they've had where they've taken territory before, but you're forming a new, basically, unit high school, right? So the complexities of this are very staggering. And, you know, I think you have to know some of the benefits, or at least be thinking about, okay, what are the benefits to District 210 before you move forward?
Understood. Let me ask you a question, Rich. Again, we're just having the discussion. You said something that kind of got my attention. So 161 has said, yes, we'd like to move forward with this feasibility study. That's an accurate statement. To have it not potentially be a cost burden of the full 20,000, whatever portion of that would be assisted by the state, you would need 210. Let's just say, again, hypothetically,
yes,
you don't get the support of 210. And you determine that hey, you know what, we'll write a check for the 20,000 or whatever it turns out to be, because we want to move forward with the feasibility study. If the feasibility study comes back, the 161 committee then can determine whether it goes forward to that next step, regardless of 210's participation and or collaboration in the process?
So, to be honest, there's a very low threshold to bringing this forward. Once the committee of 10 is formed, in order to move this forward to a referendum, you need 50 signatures. Right. It's the same as all of us getting on the ballot.
Right.
With something the size of 210, getting 50 people to sign off is a non-issue, right, at least in my opinion. Having run 50 people sign my petition, so I'm guessing you could get 50 people to sign off on this. So it's not at the sole discretion of 161. Any group of 10 could carry it forward. Okay. And a feasibility study is technically not even required. Again, this would be filing a referendum with a plan. At this point in time, I certainly don't know anyone with the expertise that we're talking about here to even write this and support it to the public. But when you get to the referendum writing, you would move to that committee of 10, as Michelle laid it out. And I did look. She has, laid out that it's volunteers and they live within the area. But then they would ultimately move the referendum forward and get the 50 signatures to put it on the ballot.
So I kind of want to go back to your point. I agree with you. This is like neurosurgery, and you're trying to pull apart synapses that nobody's ever done before. But a group of people that could get together 50 signatures and would move this along could get it on a referendum ballot. Is that accurate?
They would still have to go through the ROE and the state superintendent.
And so the idea that they would go to the ROE without a feasibility study would probably end it there? And
the state superintendent, because we're looking at, again, the list that I referenced is from Michelle, it tells you, and that's what we wrote our RFP based on, is here's all the information we need. If you don't give that to the state superintendent,
got it,
he or she is not going to approve it. It could still get there, but you're going a legal course that...
Okay, that'll clarify that point for me. Thank you. I don't want to dominate questions because I got like 4 more. Go ahead. All right. So, here's the way I kind of see this. It's just a normal logical process. We've identified the problem. The problem is there's a building sitting on Harlem Avenue that isn't being utilized. And any normal problem solving, you would create alternatives. An alternative has been created. The next step in that would be to evaluate the alternatives, assess the alternatives. I think that's what Rich has is at this point right now, is that it's a, hey, there's an alternative being presented. Do we, as a board, want to join them in the potential assessment of that alternative? And that's what I was going to say to my 6 colleagues, but there's 5 here this evening on the board to determine, is that what we want to be, is that where we want to go with this next step? It sounds like they may be going irrespective of our position.
And I have no direction on that.
Understood.
From
I'm talking to the 5 individuals here because
if I can take my board hat off for just a second, put just the Rich Marin hat on, although it's tough for people to distinguish. There are certainly folks who assume that I think this is a good idea. I have made it clear from the very beginning, I have no idea if this is a good idea. I don't know enough about your finances. I barely know enough about 161 finances, and it is complex beyond my comprehension. When I sit by myself and try to think of it, I can work myself into any rat hole about any of these very detailed things. I am not in a position to say that when we get there, I ultimately support it. What I can say is there is a problem that you identified. There are people out in the public who want to see this saw through, and my whole goal in creating the 161 committee is to keep it, as I say, out of the Facebook realm and out in the public eye. So we're trying to have Michelle come in and speak. We're trying to have the boards interact. We're enforcing the Open Meetings Act and FOIA requests. This isn't, a dream of mine to get to consolidation. It is a goal of mine to openly get to enough facts where we can say, look, this makes no sense to anyone. Forget about the guy in Manhattan. It doesn't make sense to me in Tinley Park. It doesn't make, or it makes sense to everyone. Therefore, there's a reason behind it.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking. You're not asking 210 for any financial support in this, right?
No.
You're just asking for us to share information with you?
Correct. Well, share information and to some degree time.
Well, but
they're asking us to have a board approval to move forward with the feasibility study.
so that they can receive the compensation or potential offset of the resources, financial resources needed to do the feasibility study. So they are asking for a commitment to move forward from that aspect. No other commitment, but a commitment.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, there is a financial component in that the time of your administrators or yourselves isn't free, but there's no additional commitment beyond what you already have.
Time is probably the most valuable.
Right. Right.
Ron or Beth, any thoughts, questions? Which you don't have any. No? Joe?
Got one. Maybe from Mr. Kaufman, maybe. You did a presentation, I believe it was May meeting, June meeting, maybe even July, when you did our 5-cast. And Mr. Marin talked about the financial implications. At that meeting, I think it was discussed, and I know Dr. Tingley in a couple of presentations, even at the Senior Citizen Breakfast, had mentioned that the threshold for District 210 to operate 3 schools is a total of 6,000 students. If this were to go through ultimately beyond the consolidation, beyond the study, that would put us, by my calculation, somewhere around 5,000 students, give or take, remaining. Forget about the impact on revenue for a second, but with 5,000 students, how feasible would it be for District 210 to continue to operate 3 schools?
Well, in my opinion, I think it would be very difficult. I think we'd be back to the situation where we were when we were trying to operate 4 schools for the entire district. So I think we're going to be shifting now that back over here, and now we would be, how would we maintain 3 schools with only 5,000 students?
And those projections, when we dipped under 6,000 students, didn't account for a loss of revenue either.
Right, well, then there's going to be, in this situation, we would be losing a large portion of our tax base, and so.
That's what I meant, that projection didn't include that loss of the
Right,
tax
we're
base,
just
that was
looking-
just strictly a drop in students.
Right, as we're going out, we're projecting if we lost more students, how would that affect it? Yes, that was just. Yeah.
But understand, with this loss of revenue, you're also losing expense. as you are no
I
longer
understand.
educated 1,500.
I understand.
And that would all be part of the feasibility study, I would assume.
The feasibility study that I've seen includes student projections. I don't know the technique that any individual firm would use, but it does use projections across both districts to come up with student population projections.
Have we, like this RFP you've mentioned a couple times, you're in the RFP process right now, it's been led?
Correct. So what we did is we released an RFP because ultimately to make a decision for 161, whether Lincoln Way signs on or not, we have to know what costs we're looking at. So we're basing a cost estimate off of what Michelle told us during her presentation. I estimate high, she was saying 12 to 20,000. I'm saying 20 because that's the safe way to go. But obviously, whether Lincoln Way signs on or not, you pointed to, the next question is going to be, do we proceed either way? And for that, we need to figure out what the impact would be financially for 161.
When do you expect your RFP to be completed? When were they supposed to get back?
I'd like to use my phone a friend.
Sure. You can ask the audience for the ballpark. Was
When
it?
is your going to be completed?
Yes.
Within a day.
When do they have to respond by?
They, at the end of the day today.
Oh,
So
right now?
Okay. We've got 3.5 hours to finish the work.
But as I said, that's to garner more information, whether or not what
And then
happens.
your process would be then to vet these, probably at your next board meeting,
Mhm.
and then determination to make a recommendation as to who to move forward with? Would it be that quickly, or how would you do that?
We would probably vet them with the committee that we have.
The 161 off committee, not the board.
Exactly, and then go back to the full board and say, here's the criteria we used and how we vetted them. Here's the number of responses we got. Obviously, it's a very simple process. If we get one response, if we get 10, which were the number of consultants listed, there's more work to be done. But I would prefer to do that away from the board table and then take it back with the recommendation.
What is your expectation of the cycle time of that process?
If we're going to go ahead with the feasibility study, I would see that kicking off in November. So
So you think within the next 30 days, you'll have
Yeah.
enough time to assess the RFP and then have that recommendation to the board?
yeah, the 161 board has another meeting Wednesday, and then we have another meeting in November. Because we do 2 meetings a month, we've got an extra meeting tucked in there. So we can meet as a committee. We can show the proposals to the board on Wednesday, have another committee meeting, and then come back with a recommendation in November.
All right. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, concerns? Hearing none, this is an action item, so we can choose to table it, or I would entertain at this time a motion to participate in the feasibility study associated with 161. It's been presented and discussed by Mr. Marin. Is there a motion? No.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second of that motion? I would second that motion. If I could do that, right?
Yeah, I think you can.
I knew I could. I was just a confirmation. I'm insecure. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion regarding the motion? And the motion would be to participate in the Summit Hill 161 Unit District Feasibility Study. If there's no additional discussion, there's a motion and a second. I call for a vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. There are 4 noes. I will read them off. Beth Janice Doyle, no. Chris Luchetti, no. Ron Lulo, no. Joseph Kostick, no. There are 2 yeses, Aaron Janik and Joseph Kirking. The motion is...
4 noes, the motion fails. At this point in time, we will not be participating in the District 161 feasibility study.
Wow, shame on you.
Well, we can look at the possibility.
Okay.
15.8 million
The
sitting
next
there.
item on the action items are presentation of invoices for September 21st, 2018 through October 18th, 2018. Is there a motion to accept the presentation of
Proof you
invoices?
don't care.
Motion to approve invoices in the amount of $1,876,655.03.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments regarding said invoices?